A mother ant and her daughter were out for a walk in their underground city. They were having a lovely day until they came upon a group of protesters outside the Queen's domain. One, with a sign reading, "It's time to go," spotted them and quickly approached. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can you spare a moment to take a look at some alarming literature and help support our cause?" he half shouted at her. The mother held up her hand and tried to pass, but the protester blocked her and continued. "It is imperative that we evacuate the colony. Did you know that the dirt we live in, that we raise our children in, contains magnesium and aluminum and God knows what else?" Again, she politely but firmly shook her head, pulling her daughter along as the man shouted after her, "You owe it to your little girl to evacuate now." After they gained some distance, the young ant looked up worriedly at her mother. "Was that man right, Mommy? Are we in danger?" The mother smiled. "No, sweetheart, don't worry. Just because they use big words to try to scare us doesn't mean the anti-vax movement has any idea what it's talking about." A young woman brings home her fiancé to meet her parents. After dinner, her mother tells her father to find out about the young man. The father invites the fiancé to his study for a drink. "So what are your plans?" the father asks the young man. "I am a scholar," he replies. "A scholar." The father says. "Admirable, but what will you do to provide a nice house for my daughter to live in, as she's accustomed to?" "I will study," the young man replies, "and God will provide for us." "And how will you buy her a beautiful engagement ring such as she deserves?" asks the father. "I will concentrate on my studies," the young man replies. "God will provide for us." "And children?" asks the father. "How will you support the children?" "Don't worry, sir. God will provide," replies the fiancé. The conversation proceeds like this, and each time the father questions, the young idealist insists that God will provide. Later that evening, the mother asks, "How did it go, honey?" The father answers, "He has no job and no plans, but the good news is he thinks I'm God." During the wedding rehearsal, the groom approaches the pastor with an unusual offer. "Look, I'll give you $100 if you'll change the wedding vows. When you get to the part where I'm supposed to promise to love, honor, and obey, and be faithful to her forever, I'd appreciate it if you'd just leave that out." He passes the minister a $100 bill and walks away satisfied. On the day of the wedding, when it comes time for the groom's vows, the pastor looks the young man in the eye and says, "Will you promise to prostrate yourself before her? Obey her every command and wish, serve her breakfast in bed every morning of your life, and swear eternally before God and your lovely wife that you will not ever even look at another woman as long as you both shall live?" The groom gulps, looks around, and says in a tiny voice, "Yes," then leans toward the pastor and hisses, "I thought we had a deal." The pastor puts a $100 bill into the groom's hand and whispers, "She made me a better offer." A bride and groom just married are on their honeymoon. The first night, getting ready to consummate the marriage, the bride starts to undo her new husband's clothes. She starts by taking of his shoes and socks. To her surprise, she sees that his toes all mangled and gnarly, and asks, "Good heavens, what is wrong with your toes?" The groom explains, "Well, when I was 3, I came down with toelio, which left them this way." Content with this answer, the bride continues to undress him and takes off his pants, again shocked when she sees his knees bent and crooked. "What is wrong with your knees?" "Well," the groom replies, "when I was 6, I contracted the measles and was cursed with these bad knees." The bride loves her husband very much and looks past it. She continues on and removes his briefs. Unfazed this time. "Let me guess, smallcocks." A lawyer, a rabbi, and a Buddhist monk are driving together on Route 66. It's beginning to get dark, and they are wishing for a place to stop, but there isn't a town for miles. Then they spot an old farmhouse and decide to ask. The farmer meets them at the door and listens to their request. He says that he would be glad to let them stay, but he only has 2 extra beds, so one of them would have to sleep in the barn. The monk says that since his religion values self-sacrifice, he'd sleep in the barn. About 5 minutes later, there was a tap on the door. When the farmer opened the door, there stood the monk. "I can't do it. There's a cow in there. Cows are sacred." With a sigh, the rabbi says that he'll sleep in the barn. 10 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. There stands the rabbi. "There's a pig in the barn. Pigs are unclean." The lawyer says, "This is just insane. I'll sleep in the barn. I'll see y'all in the morning." 3 minutes later, there is the sound of heavy running footsteps on the porch, and the door is struck with a booming crash. The hinges tear loose from the frame. The door flies across the room and shatters against the wall. There stand the pig and the cow. Yesterday, my son emailed me asking why I didn't do something useful with my time. "Like sitting around playing on my computer is not a good thing?" I asked. Talking about my doing something useful seems to be his favorite topic of conversation. He said he was only thinking of me. He said and suggested that I go down to the senior center and hang out with the ladies. I did this, and when I got home last night, I decided to play a prank on him. I emailed him and told him that I had joined a parachute club. He replied, "Are you nuts? You're 69 years old and now you're going to start jumping out of airplanes?" I told him that I even got a membership card and emailed a copy to him. He immediately telephoned me and yelled, "Good grief, Mom. Where are your glasses? This is a membership to a prostitute club, not a parachute club." "Oh man, I'm in trouble again," I said. "I really don't know what to do. I signed up for 5 jumps a week." The line went quiet, and his friend picked up the phone and said that my son had fainted. Life as a senior citizen is not getting any easier, but sometimes it can be fun. 2 90-year-old barrel racing cowgirls, Rose and Barb, had been friends all of their lives. When it was clear that Rose was dying, Barb visited her every day. One day, Barb said, "Rose, we both loved barrel racing all our lives, and we rode until we could hardly walk. Please do me one favor. When you get to heaven, somehow you must let me know if there's barrel racing there." Rose looked up at Barb from her deathbed. "Barb, you've been my best friend for many years. If it's at all possible, I'll do this favor for you." Shortly after that, Rose passed on. At midnight, a couple of nights later, Barb was awakened from a sound sleep by a blinding flash of white light and a voice calling out to her. "Barb, Barb, who is it?" asked Barb, sitting up suddenly. "Who is it?" "Barb, it's me, Rose." "You're not Rose. Rose just died." "I'm telling you, it's me, Rose," insisted the voice. "Rose, where are you?" "In heaven," replied Rose. "I have some really good news and a little bad news." "Tell me the good news first," said Barb. "The good news," Rose said, "is that there's barrel racing in heaven. Better yet, all of our horses who died before us are here too. Better than that, we're all young again. Better still, it's always summer, and it never rains or snows. And best of all, we can ride all we want, and our horses never get tired." "That's fantastic," said Barb. "It's beyond my wildest dreams. So what's the bad news? You're up this Friday night." 3 weddings were occurring at the same hotel one weekend. After the ceremonies and wedding meals, all 3 grooms happened to be at the bar at the same time, and they got talking about how they were looking forward to their wedding nights. The first groom said, "Hey, we should let each other know how we got on. How about at breakfast? The number of pieces of toast we order is the number of times we, consummated our marriages." The other 2 grooms agreed, and they went on their way, partying until the small hours, whereafter they took their respective brides to their respective rooms for their respective wedding nights. The next morning at breakfast, they all gave each other little smiles until a waiter asked the first groom how many pieces of toast he would like. "Just 3 pieces of toast for me," he announced, and the other 2 grooms gave him appreciative nods. The second groom, when asked by the waiter, said in a slightly louder voice, "I shall have 5, yes, 5 pieces of toast, please." And with a big grin, he looked around and saw the other 2 grooms winking and raising their glasses of orange juice in his direction. Finally, the waiter approached the third groom and asked him how many pieces of toast he would like. The man answered, "I will have 7 pieces of toast, please, and can you make 2 of them brown?" A man in Phoenix calls his son in New York the day before Thanksgiving and says, "I hate to ruin your day, but I have to tell you that your mother and I are divorcing. 45 years of misery is enough." "Pop, what are you talking about?" the son screams. "We can't stand the sight of each other any longer," the father says. "We're sick of each other, and I'm sick of talking about this, so you call your sister in Chicago and tell her." Frantic, the son calls his sister, who explodes on the phone. "Like heck they're getting divorced," she shouts. "I'll take care of this." She calls Phoenix immediately and screams at her father, "You are not getting divorced. Don't do a single thing until I get there. I'm calling my brother back and we'll both be there tomorrow. Until then, don't do a thing. Do you hear me?" And hangs up. The old man hangs up the phone and turns to his wife. "Okay," he says. "They're coming for Thanksgiving and paying their own way." A young, sexy woman passing by Tom's pet shop saw a board. "Monkey who does great sex." She went in, bought that monkey, and walked away with the instruction manual. The manual said, "Give a good bath to the monkey, then you take a bath. Make him sit on the bed and you lie down without wearing anything. Leave the rest to the monkey. Repeat all steps for repeat performance." Accordingly, the woman gave the monkey a bath, bathed herself, and slept on the naked. The monkey did nothing. Disappointed, she again gave him a bath, had a bath, and lay down naked on the bed. Again, the monkey did nothing. She referred to the manual again. It said, "In case of no activity, call the shop owner for support." She called, and Tom arrived in 10 minutes. He asked the woman to lie down. He then looked at the monkey and shouted, "This is the last time I'm teaching you. Watch carefully and learn." This guy is having an affair with a married woman, and her husband comes home early from work one day. She jumps up and tells the man to go into the bathroom to hide. Just as he gets in the bathroom and she hides his clothes under the bed, the husband opens the door and comes in. He asks, "What the hell are you doing?" Thinking quickly, the wife says, "Waiting for you." The suspicious husband looks at her in disbelief and says, "But you're naked." Again, the woman says, "Yeah, I was waiting for you." The husband relaxes and says, "Hold on, I'm going to jump in the shower. I'll be back in a flash." The wife tries to stop him, but he just ignores her and rushes for the bathroom. When he opens the bathroom door, there is a naked man jumping around and clapping. The husband asks, "What in the hell are you doing?" He replied, "I'm the exterminator, and your wife called saying you guys had a problem with moths." The husband looks him over and says, "But you're naked." The man looks down, jumps in surprise, and mutters, "Them little bastards." A blonde had been married for about a year. One day she came running up to her husband, jumping for joy. He didn't know how to react, so he started jumping up and down along with her. "Why are we so happy?" he asked. She said, "Honey, I have some really great news for you." "Great," he said. "Tell me why you're so happy about it." She stopped, breathless from all the jumping up and down. "I'm pregnant," she gasped. The husband was ecstatic, as they had been trying for quite a while. He grabbed her and kissed her. "Wow, that is wonderful. I couldn't be happier." Then she said, "Oh, honey, there's more." "What do you mean more?" he asked. "Well, we are not having just one baby. We are going to have twins." He was amazed at how she could know so soon after getting pregnant. "How do you know that?" he asked. "It was easy," she said. "I went to the pharmacy and bought the 2-pack home pregnancy test kit. Both tests came out positive." A number of young girls were beginning to use lipstick and would put it on in the school bathroom. That was fine, but after they put on their lipstick, they would press their lips to the mirror, leaving dozens of little lip prints. Every night, the maintenance man would remove them, and the next day, the girls would put them back. Finally, the principal decided that something had to be done. She called all the girls to the bathroom and met them there with the maintenance man. She explained that all these lip prints were causing a major problem for the custodian, who had to clean the mirrors every night. To demonstrate how difficult it had been to clean the mirrors, she asked the maintenance man to show the girls how much effort was required. He took out a long-handled mop, dipped it in the toilet, and cleaned the mirror with it. Since then, there have been no lip prints on the mirror. One winter morning during breakfast, a husband and wife in northern Minnesota were listening to the radio. They heard the announcer say, "We're going to have 8 to 10 inches of snow today. You must park your car on the even-numbered side of the street so the snowplows can get through." So the good wife went out and moved her car. A week later, while they are eating breakfast again, the radio announcer said, We are expecting 10 to 12 inches of snow today. You must park your car on the odd-numbered side of the street so the snow plows can get through. The good wife went out and moved her car again. The next week, they were again having breakfast when the radio announcer said, "We are expecting 12 to 14 inches of snow today. You must park." Then the electric power went out. The good wife was very upset, and with a worried look on her face, she said, "Honey, I don't know what to do. Which side of the street do I need to park on so the snow plows can get through?" With the love and understanding in his voice that all men who are married to blondes exhibit, the husband replied, "Why don't you just leave it in the garage this time?" Earl walked into a drugstore in Kentucky and asked to talk to a male pharmacist. The woman he was talking to said that she was the only pharmacist, and as she and her sister owned the store, there were no male employees. She then asked if she could help him. Earl said that it was something that he would be much more comfortable discussing with a male pharmacist. The lady pharmacist assured him that she was completely professional, and whatever it was that he needed to discuss, he could be confident that she would treat him with a high level of professionalism. Earl then agreed and began by saying, "This is tough for me to discuss, but I get erections every day that last more than 4 hours. It causes me a lot of problems and severe embarrassment, and I was wondering what you could give me for it." The pharmacist said, "Just a minute, I'll talk to my sister." When she returned, she said, "We discussed it at length, and this is the absolute best we can do. We can give you 1/3 ownership in the store, a company pickup truck, a king-size bed, and $3,000 a month in living expenses." After pulling a farmer over for speeding in an urban area, the police officer starts to lecture him about his callous disregard for public safety. The officer goes on, even belittling the farmer, saying he must be a hick from the sticks and not know how to behave in a civilized area. Then he starts writing out the traffic citation. But as he writes, he has to keep swatting at a swarm of flies that are buzzing all around his head. The farmer asks, "Having some trouble with circle flies there, are you?" The officer pauses to take another swat and says, "Yes, if that's what they are. I've never heard them called circle flies, but they're really annoying me today." The farmer was more than pleased to enlighten him, saying, "Circle flies are very common on farms. They are called circle flies because you almost always find them circling around the back end of a horse." The officer scowls at the farmer and points at him, saying, "Hey, are you trying to say I'm a horse's ass?" "Oh no, officer." The farmer replies, "I reckon I have far too much respect for law enforcement to imply such a thing." "That's good for you then, because I'm in no mood," the officer says, and goes back to writing out the ticket. After a brief pause, the farmer scratched his chin and then added, "It is real hard to fool those circle flies, though." A man walks out to the street and catches a taxi just going by. He gets into the taxi, and the cabbie says, "Perfect timing. You're just like Frank." Passenger, "Who?" Cabbie, "Frank Feldman. He's a guy who did everything right all the time." Passenger, "There are always a few clouds over everybody." Cabbie, "Not Frank Feldman. He was a terrific athlete. He could have won the Grand Slam at tennis. He could golf with the pros. He sang like an opera baritone and danced like a Broadway star, and you should have heard him play the piano. He was an amazing guy." Passenger, "Sounds like he was really something special." Cabbie, "There's more. He had a memory like a computer. He remembered everybody's birthday. He knew all about wine, which foods to order, and which fork to eat them with. He could fix anything. Not like me. I change a fuse and the whole street blacks out. But Frank Feldman could do everything right every single time." Passenger, "Wow, what a guy." Cabbie, "He always knew the quickest way to go in traffic and avoid traffic jams. Not like me. I always seem to get stuck in them. But Frank, he never made a mistake, and he really knew how to treat a woman and make her feel good. He would never answer her back even if she was in the wrong, and his clothing was always immaculate, with his shoes highly polished too. He was the perfect man. He never made a mistake. No one could ever measure up to Frank Feldman." Passenger, "How did you meet him?" Cabbie, "I never actually met Frank. He died and I married his wife." The old man placed an order for 1 hamburger, French fries, and a drink. He unwrapped the plain hamburger and carefully cut it in half, placing one half in front of his wife. He then carefully counted out the French fries, dividing them into 2 piles, and neatly placed one pile in front of his wife. He took a sip of the drink, his wife took a sip, and then set the cup down between them. As he began to eat his few bites of hamburger, the people around them were looking over and whispering. Obviously, they were thinking, that poor old couple, all they can afford is one meal for the 2 of them. As the man began to eat his fries, a young man came to the table and politely offered to buy another meal for the old couple. The old man said they were just fine. They were used to sharing everything. People closer to the table noticed the little old lady hadn't eaten a bite. She sat there watching her husband eat and occasionally taking turns sipping the drink. Again, the young man came over and begged them to let him buy another meal for them. This time, the old woman said, "No, thank you, we are used to sharing everything." Finally, as the old man finished and was wiping his face neatly with the napkin, the young man again came over to the little old lady who had yet to eat a single bite of food and asked, "What is it you're waiting for?" She answered, "The teeth." A man walks into a bar with his dog, but before they can take a seat, the bartender shakes his head and says, "Sorry, buddy, no animals allowed." To everyone's shock, the dog looks up and says, "Oh, come on! Can't a guy get a drink without all this fuss?" The bartender crosses his arms. "Nice try, pal. Another one of those talking dog gimmicks, huh? Not buying it. Both of you need to go." "It's not a trick, I promise," the man protests. "Here, I'll prove it. How about I step out for a bit? You can chat with my dog yourself." The man walks out, leaving the bartender alone with the dog. "So, about that drink," the dog says, tail wagging. Stunned, the bartender blinks and mutters, "Okay, sure, on the house. But you know what? My wife works at the cafe next door, and she'd lose her mind if you walked in and ordered something. Here's $10. Get yourself a coffee and keep the change." The dog grabs the money and trots off toward the cafe. 10 minutes go by, and the dog hasn't returned. Just as the man comes back, he asks, "Where's my dog?" The bartender, looking worried, says, "He went to the cafe, but he hasn't come back yet." The two head out to find him. As they pass the alley between the bar and the cafe, they stop in their tracks. There's the dog cozying up with a fancy French poodle. "Rover!" the man shouts. "What on earth are you doing? You've never behaved like this before." The dog turns his head nonchalantly and replies, "Hey, I've never had money before." Jack grew up hearing the legendary tale of his family's extraordinary tradition. For generations, his father, grandfather, and even his great-grandfather had all walked on water on their 18th birthday. According to the story, each one had strode across the lake to the pub on the far side for their very first legal drink. As Jack's own 18th birthday approached, he could barely contain his excitement. Finally, it was his turn to carry on the family legacy. With his best friend Liam in tow, Jack rowed a boat out to the middle of the lake. Brimming with anticipation, he took a deep breath, stepped out of the boat, and immediately plunged straight into the freezing water. Panicked and flailing, Jack struggled to stay afloat. Thankfully, Liam managed to pull him back into the boat, leaving him soaked, humiliated, and thoroughly confused. Dripping wet and fuming, Jack stormed over to his grandmother's house. "Gran," he exclaimed, "it's my 18th birthday. Why couldn't I walk across the lake like Dad, Granddad, and Great-Granddad?" His grandmother, barely containing a laugh, looked at Jack with twinkling eyes. "Ah, Jack, my boy," she said with a knowing smile, "that's because your father, your grandfather, and your great-grandfather were all born in December when the lake was frozen solid. You, my dear, were born in August. Now who's the daft one, eh?" One autumn, on a remote reservation, the Indians asked their new chief if the upcoming winter would be cold or mild. The chief, being part of a modern society, hadn't been taught the old ways of predicting the weather. When he looked at the sky, he had no idea what to expect. To play it safe, he told his tribe, "Yes, this winter will be cold. Start gathering firewood to prepare." Wanting to ensure he was giving good advice, the chief decided to call the National Weather Service. "Will this winter be cold?" he asked. The meteorologist replied, "Yes, it looks like it's going to be a cold winter." The chief returned to his tribe and said, "Gather even more firewood to prepare for a harsh winter." A week later, he called the weather service again. "Is it going to be a very cold winter?" he asked. "Yes," the meteorologist responded. "It's shaping up to be a very cold winter." The chief went back to his tribe and urged them to collect every piece of wood they could find. 2 weeks later, he called the weather service once more, seeking confirmation. "Are you absolutely sure this winter will be very cold?" "Absolutely," the meteorologist said. "It's looking like one of the coldest winters on record." Curious, the chief asked, "How can you be so sure?" The meteorologist replied, "Because the Indians are collecting firewood like crazy." Miss Beatrice, the church organist, was in her 80s and had never been married. She was admired for her sweetness and kindness to all. One afternoon, the pastor came to call on her, and she showed him into her quaint sitting room. She invited him to have a seat while she prepared tea. As he sat facing her old pump organ, the young minister noticed a cut glass bowl sitting on top of it. The bowl was filled with water. In the water floated, of all things, a condom. When she returned with tea and scones, they began to chat. The pastor tried to stifle his curiosity about the bowl of water and its strange floater. But soon it got the better of him, and he could no longer resist. "Miss Beatrice," he said, "I wonder if you would tell me about this," pointing to the bowl. "Oh, yes," she replied. "Isn't it wonderful? I was walking through the park a few months ago, and I found this little package on the ground. The directions said to place it on the organ, keep it wet, and that it would prevent the spread of disease. Do you know I haven't had the flu all winter?" Jacob, age 92, and Rebecca, age 89, are all excited about their decision to get married. They go for a stroll to discuss the wedding, and on the way they pass a drugstore. Jacob suggests they go in. Jacob addresses the man behind the counter. "Are you the owner?" The pharmacist answers yes. Says Jacob, "We're about to get married. Do you sell heart medication?" Pharmacist, "Of course we do." Jacob, "How about medicine for circulation?" Pharmacist, "All kinds." Jacob, "Medicine for rheumatism, scoliosis?" Pharmacist, "Definitely." Jacob, "How about Viagra?" Pharmacist, "Of course." Jacob, "Medicine for memory problems, arthritis, jaundice?" Pharmacist, "Yes, a large variety. The works." Jacob, "What about vitamins, sleeping pills, Geritol, antidotes for Parkinson's disease?" Pharmacist, "Absolutely." Jacob, "You sell wheelchairs and walkers?" Pharmacist, "All speeds and sizes." Jacob says to the pharmacist, "We'd like to register here for our wedding gifts, please." 3 sons left home, went out on their own, and prospered. Years later, they get back together to discuss the gifts they were able to give their elderly mother for her 90th birthday. The first said, "I built a big house for our mother." The second said, "I sent her a Mercedes with a driver." The third smiled and said, "I've got you both beat. You know how Mom enjoys the Bible, and you know she can't see very well. I sent her a brown parrot that can recite the entire Bible. It took 20 monks in a monastery 12 years to teach him. I had to pledge to contribute $100,000 a year for 10 years, but it was worth it. Mom just has to name the chapter and verse, and the parrot will recite it." Soon thereafter, Mom sent out her letters of thanks. "Milton," she wrote to the first son, "the house you built is so huge. I live in only one room, but I have to clean the whole house." "Marvin," she wrote to another, "I am too old to travel. I stay home all the time, so I never use the Mercedes, and the driver is so rude." "Dearest Melvin," she wrote to her third son, "you were the only son to have the good sense to know what your mother likes. That chicken was delicious." A drover walks into a bar with a pet crocodile by his side. He puts the crocodile up on the bar, and he turns to the astonished patrons and says, "I'll make you a deal. I'll open the crocodile's mouth and put my manhood inside, and then the crocodile will close its mouth for 1 minute. He will then open his mouth and I'll remove my unit unscathed. In return for witnessing this spectacle, each of you will buy me a drink." The crowd murmured their approval. The drover stood up on the bar and dropped his trousers. He placed his manhood in the crocodile's mouth. The crocodile closed its mouth and the crowd gasped. After a minute, the drover grabbed a beer bottle and smacked the crocodile really, really hard on the top of its head. The croc opened its mouth and the drover removed his genitals unscathed as promised. The crowd cheered and the first of his free drinks was delivered. He stood up again and said, "I'll pay anyone 100 pounds who is willing to give it a try." A hush fell over the crowd. After a while, a hand went up at the back of the bar, and a blonde woman timidly spoke up, "I'll try it, but don't hit me so hard with the bottle."